नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. We are going to see another interesting story by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, and the title of the story is The Physician's Knife. Let's read the story. Amar was a village boy who had been suffering so much from a boil on his back that he attempted suicide. So there was a boy named Amar, and he had a boil on his back, and it was so painful that he even attempted to commit suicide. His brother, mother, and his close relatives were all trying to alleviate his pain by using hand fans or even orally blowing on the swelling boil. So there was a boil on his back, and his relatives and mothers, they were trying to just fan it or to put on some nice ointment or ice or whatever just to relieve the pain on his back. One of the neighbors advised that the boy should be given some anesthetic drug to save him from such unbearable physical agony. Still, another person recommended that it was better to relieve him eternally from such a painful experience. So one of the neighbors, they came and told him that let us give him some heavy anesthetic so that he is not having to tolerate such a heavy pain, bad pain. And another person came and told them that let us kill this boy because he is suffering so much. And his argument was that the boy has been suffering so terribly because he was alive, so if he were to die, he wouldn't be in so much pain. The result would be the complete solace to both the deceased and the patient. So many people were coming and giving so many interesting advices to the boy. One was saying that let's kill the boy, other was saying that let us put him in coma, and his mother and brother and sister, they were all putting some oil on top of the boil. Some of them were blowing on it. Some of them were fanning the boy. So different people were suggesting different things because the boy was in so much pain. But the boy had a wise father. Unnerved by such advice, the wise father of the boy immediately sent for an experienced physician, disregarding his son's so-called well-wishers. So there are so many well-wishers or so-called well-wishers. They are all trying to help the boy in their own little way, but the father wanted to get help from a nice and experienced physician. When the physician advised that a minor surgery had to be performed on the boy, the relatives, including the boy's mother, grandmother, and others, started weeping all in a row. So the physician came and said that he had to do a minor surgery and it might be a little painful. But immediately the boy's mother and brother and sisters, they were all wailing and crying over this. The ignorant boy started abusing the physician with vulgar words, saying, "You have come to kill me. Leave me alone. I must send for the police to arrest you. Why don't you strike the knife on your own body? Would you do it on your own son? I would rather take a dose of poison rather than surrender myself to you." And hearing all this, the physician was unmoved. He knew the dilemma of the boy. Turning a deaf ear to the boy's delirious outburst, the physician held him tightly while he pressed and executed the surgical operation on the boil. After a while, the boy was completely relieved of all agony and he became well within a few days. So The doctor had to actually remove the boil, which was causing so much pain on the boy. And he had to just use a knife and cut open and remove all the pus and all the dirt from the boy's back. And he was so patient because he had to tolerate the misbehavior of the boy who was crying. So, what's the lesson of the story? Just like a real physician, quite often the real spiritual masters and pure saintly persons also dissect some of the knots in the obstinate mind of living entities by apparently distasteful injunctions and instructions varying on the degrees of entanglement. But the suffering entity is hardly inclined to agree with such injunctions and instead misapply a lot of harsh words to those saintly persons, blaspheming them as their enemies and extremely merciless executioners. So called relatives and friends of such suffering entities strongly advocate against such a surgical operation to avoid the apparent pain and uneasiness. Some such pseudo friends, even in the name of impersonalism, advise one to commit suicide to get rid of the rut. So let's go over this once again. So, when a boy has a boil on his back, then the right solution is to cut open the boil and remove the pus out of it. Otherwise, the pain is not going to go away just by applying some oil on it or just having some handheld fans against the boil or anything. So, when the spiritual master or the pure devotee speaks strongly about cutting open the wound and curing the disease, it is very unnatural for the conditioned soul and also his so called friends and relatives. But the truth is the truth, and it has to be spoken for the benefit of all. But the boys, who are all just boys because they have no knowledge about ultimate truths, they always complain and fight and condemn and blaspheme the true philosophers and the true spiritual well-wishers of all by strong words. But just like the strong action of the physician is for the betterment of the boy, same way the spiritual masters and the pure devotees are speaking for the welfare of others, and they tolerate the blasphemous behavior of the so-called well-wishers of a living entity. The so-called relatives and friends, they want to avoid the surgical operation and they want to just try to give some temporary relief. So, when there is a boil, the permanent relief is to remove it and let the wound heal. That's the proper relief. But if you were to just do some temporary relief, there is not going to be any permanent gain and it is going to just make the situation even worse. So the materialists, they try to do those type of activities. They just try to give some so-called benefit for the living entity rather than give the absolute benefit. In fact, none of these ways can be fruitfully undertaken for the eternal welfare of an entity. The constitutional position of the living entity is only realized after disentanglement from all unworthy mundane attachments with the help of saintly injunctions sincerely followed. This enables one to enter into the province of devotional service, which is the only way to eternal bliss and peace of mind. So, the ultimate reality that can really give bliss and happiness to the living entity is pure devotional service. But when a pure devotee goes and says that all of you please become pure devotees of Krishna, that is the most happy situation for you, everybody starts bickering and throwing stones at the pure devotees. But the quality of a devotee is as follows: Tidikshava Karunika Suhrida Sarvadehinam Ajatava Shanta Sadava Sadhubhushana. So, a devotee is very, very tolerant because he has to tolerate the misbehavior of all the non devotees who do not understand the value of devotion. So, this world is Dukkhalayam Asashvatam. So, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that Mam Upetit Kaunteya Dukkhalayam Asashvatam Napnuvanti Mahatmanaha Samsiddhim Paramam Gata. So, Krishna says that this world is a world of pain, and there is a little bit of pleasure here and there, but in toto, this world is painful. Even in the womb of the mother, the living entity has to suffer, and as soon as he is out, he thinks that he is happy, but indeed he doesn't even know who he is or where he is. He is just like an animal. And once he reaches an age of 3 or 4, he has to start carrying his books to the school, and he is put into the rat race and so forth. So his suffering starts right there. And then at the age of 13 or 14, his mind wants female companionship and so forth, and he is disturbed by that. And then he gets married, and then he has children and this and that, and he is always under tension and stress. So there is no so-called happiness in this world. There is always pain in this world, though people do not understand it. And when they realize that there is so much of pain in this world, they want some temporary benefit, some temporary happiness. So when they find that there is heat, they want to put on the AC, and when they find that there is cold, they want to turn on their heaters and this and that. And when they have some problems in their marriage, they go to a psychologist. And when they have problems with their body, they just go to a physician and so forth. So they keep on addressing these temporary problems, and before too long, death is waiting for them. So they just have lived their life like a cat or a dog, and before they understand that, they are already dead and gone. So the real aim of human life is to understand Krishna. That is the understanding given by all the Vedic literature. Vedaishta sarvai rahameva vedya. But unfortunately, people do not have time for that. And once they understand that there is so many pain and difficulties in this world, sometimes people go to the so-called philosophers or the Mayavadis or the so-called Vedantists, and they are being taught that you are God, or you just become merged with God and then you will become one with God and this and that. So that's just like killing a person just because he has a boil on his back. So Prabhupada used to say that impersonalism is spiritual suicide, because when you compare the bliss of impersonalism with the bliss of devotional service, the devotional service is so much more blissful compared to the so-called bliss of impersonalism. So impersonalism is just zero, right? Now in the material world, people are suffering, and it is their happiness is negative, and just to merge with Brahman is like bringing that happiness to zero. That means you are neither happy nor unhappy. There is no two things in the first place. So you are just one with Brahman, and that is like killing a person just because he has a boil in his back. But the real solution is that the boil has to be cut and removed. In the same way, one has to go to pure devotees or pure saintly devotees who can speak the truth and help the boy to recover, or help the person to recover from his ailments, and at the same time remove the ignorance that every person is carrying. The main ignorance that every living entity is carrying is the idea that he is the body. So the saintly person has to say that, oh fool, you are not your body, you are a spirit soul, and your Actual engagement is pure devotional service to Krishna. So that knowledge has to be received from a bona fide and a pure devotee of Krishna. So when a person receives that, and when he engages in pure devotion service to Krishna, then he gradually understands Krishna, and all the difficulties of his mind is gradually removed. But unfortunately, most people want some temporary benefit from the material world, and either they become materialists through and through their life, or they become so-called spiritualists who do not understand the mellows of devotional service to Krishna, and either of those are unfortunate situations. So the person lucky will get in touch with a pure devotee of Krishna, and then his movement towards absolute truth and absolute happiness will be achieved gradually. So one has to seek out for pure devotees of Krishna. Then he can be saved from the confusions arising because of one's touch with Maya. The other question that most people ask is, if this God is all merciful, why did he create a world where there are so many problems? So there are two answers to this question. The first answer is, God did not want you to suffer in this world. You were the one who chose to walk away from God, and the sufferings of this world is just a symptom of that original spiritual disease. And the second answer is, unless there is some pain in this world, the human being is not going to turn towards God. He is just going to be happy in this material world, and it is not going to be his ultimate good. Therefore, God puts every person in some sort of difficulty so that the person becomes thoughtful and he wants to understand the ultimate aim of life. So, unless there is pain in this world, there is no gain eternally for the spirit soul. That is why there is suffering in this world. And the Supreme Lord is like an expert physician. He knows how to put some pain on the head of the living entity so that his arrogance is removed and he becomes a loyal son of God. So Queen Kunti says in Srimad Bhagavatam, Janmaishwarya Shrutashribir Yadamanam Madappuman Naivarhati Abhidatum Vai Tvam Akinchana Gocharam. So a person who is confused by high birth or high parentage, high wealth and beauty and education, he cannot call out the name of the Supreme Lord like Oh Krishna or Oh Govinda very feelingly. Therefore, in order to let the human being call out the name of God very feelingly, there is so-called misery in this material world. So all these things can be understood by the association of a pure devotee of the Lord, and therefore one has to carefully choose the association of a nice devotee, and then all fortune comes to such a person. Thank you.